Hard Talk is on the road in Honduras, a country being torn apart by crime and violence, much of it fueled by the drugs trade. As much as 75% of the cocaine in the United States comes through Honduras by air and by sea, which is why the US government is now pushing the Hondurans to crack down on the narco-traffickers. But in this country, which is riven by corruption, is a war on drugs going to prove counterproductive? Honduras's Mosquito Coast, the most remote, sparsely populated corner of the country. The only ways in are by plane and by boat. Across this expanse of marsh and forest, the indigenous people speak their own language and eke out a living fishing and farming. Here, there's one activity that promises a route out of poverty: smuggling cocaine. Puerto Lempira is the biggest town in the Mosquitia region. The Caribbean heat hangs heavy here. So too does the taint of drugs. In recent years, these streets have seen shootings, murders, and vendettas between rival traffickers. The waters off Puerto Lempira are on the smuggling route from Colombia and Venezuela. I joined a Honduran Navy patrol tasked with disrupting the flow of cocaine. Within minutes, agents boarded a fishing boat heading for Puerto Lempira. The Honduran counter-narcotics forces now get training from American advisors, and they get US intelligence support. But the odds are still stacked against them. This search turned up nothing, but tons of cocaine are getting through every month. Colonel, how sophisticated are the narco-traffickers that you are dealing with?
Bueno, la actividad de la narcoactividad cada día está innovando su proceder, su forma de actuar. Si ustedes pueden ver, el año pasado se capturó un submarino artesanalmente confeccionado, y ellos están buscando siempre la manera. Si se le ponen obstáculos para los aviones, narcotraficantes, entonces ellos buscan otras rutas, pues la ruta marítima, la ruta terrestre. También cuentan ellos con mucha tecnología en la comunicación. Tienen radios satelitales, teléfonos de mucha potencia, y de igual manera el armamento que usan bastante nuevo, bastante sofisticado.
It strikes me that they have more resources than you do.
El recurso que maneja el narcotráfico es inmenso. Pues los cargamentos de cocaína que traen en las aeronaves, pues cuesta tanto lo que traen que a ellos no les importa, por ejemplo, destruir una avioneta. Eso significa que la cantidad, o sea, las utilidades, las ganancias son millonarias en este negocio. A medida la cocaína va avanzando hacia el norte, va adquiriendo un precio más alto cada vez.
Penetrating Honduras's drug trafficking gangs isn't easy. We journeyed to a remote rehabilitation center which can offer a way out for some of the country's most hardened criminals. The young men here have turned their backs on the gangs. Many face death if they return to their old neighborhoods. In this group, we found an assortment of users, dealers, middlemen, and murderers. One young man, we called him Marlon, agreed to talk. So, Marlon, I want you to tell me When you first got involved in the drugs business,
After first being a recruit, I became a gang member. Then I became second in command. Later I gained control of the gang. In gangs, the one who is in control is the one who is most aggressive. I became an unscrupulous person with no love for anyone. I even hated myself.
how old were you when you first killed someone?
12.
Were you trained to kill? How did you know, as a young boy, how to go about the business of murdering people?
It was an instinct that awoke within me. The rage, the hatred I felt within led me to doing that. Then, like everything else, it became an addiction. And then it became easy. After being a gang leader here, I joined a criminal group in Mexico. I was trained to kill, and later that also became normal to me. Many times I had to do horrendous things. There was a lot of money, yes, a lot of money, and good women, good cars, and good hotels.
You were part of the MS-13 network and you worked in the United States. You went to Mexico to be trained to be a killer. You worked in Honduras. All of this time, were you aware that there were people at the top of this network who were using you to help them create this narco-trafficking network right across the Americas?
Yes, of course. I knew there were people using me, but like everyone in gangs, everyone in the narco-traffic movement, we all know we are being used, but we all want to climb to a higher position, to get to be like them. Regardless of who you must kill, it doesn't matter, even if you have to kill someone from your own family. It becomes an obsession, trying to get to that position, trying to be someone of a higher rank. Someone who gives the orders instead of receiving them.
How easy is it going to be for the Honduran authorities working with the US to beat the narco-traffickers?
It will be hard, because there are people involved inside the government itself. If nothing is done within the government, it will be useless, because they themselves are the promoters. They cover the big criminals. They are the big criminals.
You make it sound like the drugs traffickers have almost bought up everything that matters inside Honduras, that they almost own this country. Is that the way you feel about it?
Of course. They have taken control of everything. Narco-trafficking is everywhere. In Congress, in politics, and even in the churches. This is how it is. It's involved in everything. Narco-traffic has taken control of our country in an extreme way.
There have been recent successes in Honduras's war on the traffickers. Drugs busts are trumpeted in the local media. But the amount of cocaine passing through the country is still rising. And the traffickers continue to buy off or kill their enemies. This is the new head of Honduras's anti-drug trafficking agency. His predecessor was murdered. Isaac Santos, welcome to Hard Talk. In the conflict between the drugs traffickers and the Honduran state, would you accept that the drugs traffickers are winning?
No, creo que es inaceptable. La lucha se está haciendo con los pocos recursos que tenemos, con las ayudas de los amigos. No se debe de permitir la derrota si todavía no se ha empleado completamente los recursos de la nación.
Let me tell you something that a narco-trafficker told to me just a day or two ago. I said to him, do you think that the Honduran government will ever really take on and defeat the gangs and the traffickers? And he laughed and he said to me, the traffickers have so much money. They have so much money and so much power, they can buy whoever and whatever they want. If that's true, how can you beat them?
Hay realidades, ellos tienen mucho poder, pero el gobierno no puede convertirse, no puede aceptar que Honduras se convierta en un narcoestado, con un narcogobierno, con una narcopolicía. Mientras haya una persona honesta, tiene que seguirse peleando, pero en Honduras no hay pocas personas honestas. La gran mayoría de la población es honesta y quizás el problema que falta es que se involucre más y vea de que el problema del narcotráfico no solo es de la policía o del gobierno, es un problema de la sociedad.
Let's talk a little bit about the Americans. They are putting enormous pressure now on you and your government to do more to stop the cocaine as it moves up from South America. Do you believe the Americans themselves could be doing much more in terms of helping you?
Es cierto, está pasando mucha droga hacia los Estados Unidos. Estamos deteniendo la que podemos y esperamos que también nuestros amigos del norte estén haciendo su guerra. Pienso yo de que el fenómeno del narcotráfico, el problema, es un problema que tiene dos polos importantes. Un polo es, por un lado, la oferta, por otro lado, la demanda.
I take your point. Obviously, the Americans have to address the consumption, the demand side of this equation. But right now, they are very focused on the supply side and stopping the supply. I know there are increasing numbers of armed US drugs enforcement agents on your territory. They have some forward operating bases. They are conducting joint operations with arms on your territory. Some people worry it's beginning to look a little like a new era of US imperialism.
Pienso de que el problema básico de la presencia de las personas o de las agencias norteamericanas en nuestro país es porque no ven un efecto, un trabajo fuerte de parte de las agencias hondureñas. Pero el problema que hay es que nosotros podríamos hacer el trabajo, pero no tenemos los recursos. Ellos pueden darnos más recursos. Por ejemplo, nuestros pilotos no tienen combustible suficiente, no tienen visores nocturnos para conducir aeronaves, para seguir las aeronaves, no tenemos radares y yo pienso que sería más económico para ellos que darnos los recursos para combatir y combatir el problema del narcotráfico. Y no lo veo así como que fuera un problema político de un nuevo imperialismo, porque al final hay una realidad, ellos tienen muchos recursos, nuestro país tiene necesidades.
Back in the remote Mosquitia region, we flew into the tiny settlement of Aguas. Its airstrip is no more than a clearing in the trees. Home to just a few hundred indigenous people, this neglected village has come to symbolize a new phase in Honduras's war on drugs. The river Patuca is the main means of transport in this remote corner of the Mosquito Coast. You find farmers, fishermen and traders plying up and down these waters by day and by night. The problem is that so too do the narco-traffickers. 2 months ago, Honduran forces launched a nighttime raid on suspected traffickers on this stretch of river. But they didn't act alone. US military helicopters and personnel were heavily involved in a joint operation which targeted a riverboat believed to have picked up a stash of drugs from a remote airstrip. What happened next is the subject of a bitter dispute. To get an eyewitness account, I paid a visit to the home of Hilda Lazama. She was on the boat, which came under heavy fire. She took a bullet through her thigh and remains seriously ill. Her son-in-law and 2 pregnant women were killed. Hilda insists all were innocent victims, not drugs traffickers, simply villagers coming back from a trip downriver.
Hilda, tell me what happened on the night of May the 11th.
Siempre viajo de noche porque de día hay sol, ¿verdad? Veníamos cargados con pasajeros también. Los pasajeros traían carga, bultos de rintines también. Entonces el pipante venía lleno. Y cuando ya veníamos cerca del landing, estábamos cerquita cuando miramos los helicópteros que andaban encima de nosotros. Cuando miramos dar la vuelta a los helicópteros, dio 2 vueltas y volvió otra vez dar vuelta cuando nos tenía así rodeados los helicópteros. Y en eso al rato cuando me di cuenta que ya me había disparado, entonces estaba disparando de los helicópteros. En cuanto sentí que me pegó el golpe, yo me zafé del pipante y me tiré al agua. Y en eso cuando estuve nadando no tenía valor de nadar porque ya estuve herida. Esta herida estaba, ya no podía. Cuando al rato me disparó otro tiro que cayó encima, cerquita de mí en el agua. En eso, cuando yo me sentí, ya estuve en una rama agarrada y me escondí, solo la cara lo tenía escondida porque los helicópteros estaban dando vueltas. Cuando después me di cuenta, cuando ya estuve aquí en el hospital, que ya lo habían baleado a otros, se habían muerto y había baleado a 2 muchachos, a mí y los otros muertos también.
The Americans have said that they believe that there was gunfire aimed at their agents, and they believe that there was a boat that was trafficking drugs on the river that night. Do you feel angry towards the Americans?
Sí, porque cuando nosotros veníamos, ¿verdad? Bien el helicóptero podría tener una luz para alumbrarnos, o bien con que nos tenía rodeado, él podía ver o bajar algún militar en el pipante, ¿verdad? Para que mire o que nos dejara nosotros subir al landing para que nos revisara a ver si qué teníamos. Pero sin eso, ellos nos dispararon. Porque ahí mismo el helicóptero paró en el landing. Pero sin eso, sin nada, ni nada, pues no nos alumbró nada. Y pues así nomás fue que nos tiraron las armas. Pero eso no debería de ser ellos.
For decades, the US military has maintained a presence in Honduras. Hundreds of American troops are stationed at the Palmarola base. Their focus used to be the war against communism in neighboring Nicaragua. Now it's the war on drugs. The Americans are using sophisticated surveillance to track and intercept the trafficking flights into eastern Honduras. This bust, shown on local TV, left 1 man dead, 3 captured. In the last month, US drug enforcement agents have themselves killed 2 suspected traffickers in operations similar to this one. The joint US-Honduran crackdown is intensifying, but given Honduras's recent history, a military coup, endemic corruption, and persistent allegations of human rights abuse, does Washington really have a reliable partner?
Ambassador Lisa Kubiski, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
When you deal with the Honduran government, do you really believe you can trust it?
You have, like any government, many different parts of the government. If you talk about President Lobo, the way he articulates his goals, many of the programs we've seen him put in place are things that we see as good for the country and also of mutual interest for the United States. If you ask me about the police force, it was the Hondurans who uncovered how ugly the problems were in the police force, and so the work that we do is to help parts of the police force or units outside it to clean up.
You said not long ago that it's hard to imagine why anybody in this country would trust the police.
I have said that it is extremely important to have a police force that they can trust, a police force that's honest and capable and able to investigate crimes.
And they don't
but
have
it's
that.
not just the police. Let me frame for you how we see security. You have a country in which the institutions of government haven't worked as well as they should. They're fragile. Okay.
As well as supporting the police here, the United States is giving extra support to the Honduran military and is putting its own armed agents in the field. And there is one joint operation I must talk to you about, which is the operation May 11th in the small remote village of Awas, where we have visited, where US and Honduran armed agents fired upon a boat on the River Patuca, which it is now clear was full of civilians. Is the US now prepared to say that was a terrible error?
Those are not the facts as we know them. What we understand to have happened was that a plane with drugs, almost half a ton of drugs, came in, landed, unloaded, put the drugs on a boat to go down a river, that the authorities...
But not this boat.
Let me get there. That they pushed the boat out into the river. The authorities went after to try to seize the drugs, and that they were fired upon and they returned fire. Now, let me finish. Having said that, there is a Honduran government investigation underway, as well as a U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency investigation underway.
Why have your investigators not spoken to Hilda Lezama, who we spoke to, who was on the boat?
In this case, there are 2 investigations that are going on right now, because the responsibility that we think the Hondurans have in this case and that we have for ourselves is to understand all the facts of the case. So if you have mentioned somebody who you say was not interviewed by the government or by us, and that's information I can take back. But until we know what were all the facts of the case, it's inappropriate to comment. What I can tell you, though, is that the preliminary investigation that the Hondurans have done has suggested that there was no wrongdoing. The context is you have more than 100 planes last year coming into the country with drugs. The government has told us their highest priority is to keep drugs from entering the country. Deaths or injuries are not the norm.
Ambassador Kubicki, thank you very much for being on Hard Talk. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Honduras's geography is a curse. The cocaine trail from South America to the US passes right through the lawless Mosquito Coast. The US sees a vital new front line in the war on drugs. A storm is coming, and Hondurans have nowhere to shelter.